Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us tonight for a virtual tour to Patagonia, land of fire and ice. Nikki here, together with Keith from Rock Jumper Birding Tours, and we are thrilled to host today's webinar. We know that many of you have been joining us faithfully every week over the last few months and are well versed on Zoom's platform. But if you're new to our webinars, we love engaging with all attendees. So please feel free to use the Q&A box to send your questions, because we will have time at the end of this virtual tour to answer as many as we can. Bobby Wilcox is our virtual tour leader today, hailing from the Mississippi Valley of eastern Iowa and growing up on his family's restored tall grass prairie and woodland. Bobby has always been an avid nature lover with a passion for conservation. Bobby has always enjoyed local backyard birding, but it wasn't until his early 20s when the boredom of a dreary Iowa winter day spurred an auspicious impulse to start counting and IDing the birds at the feeders. This was the spark of passion that everyone listening knows well, whether it happened at 5 years old or 50. Bobby's career explorations have gone from ornithologist surveying songbirds along the Colorado River to working as a resident guide at 2 of the premier birding lodges in Brazil, and now recently joining the Rock Jumper Birding team. Welcome, Bobby. Thank you for taking us to Patagonia.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Nikki. Let's see here. Get this up on the screen. All right. Thanks for the introduction, everybody. And thanks for welcoming me here. Does my screen look okay? Okay, good.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely 100%,
right.
Bobby.
Sorry, everybody. I'm a little nervous, and I'm a neophyte to Zoom, but I think we're doing okay now. So again, I'm Bobby Wilcox. Thank you so much for being here and joining us on this trip through possibly my favorite place in the world, Patagonia, in the southern Argentina. This gives you an idea of why one might come to love Patagonia. So I'm obviously one of the newer rock jumper guides, and I want to take a minute to just kind of introduce myself and explain how I came to know Patagonia. So a number of years back, my girlfriend and I, who do bird survey jobs together, were looking for work in the fall. It's hard to find work in the winter, but we came across this mysterious post on the job boards for a volunteer job studying a critically endangered bird we'd never heard of in the wilds of Patagonia. And it was hard to resist, so we signed up, and a few weeks later, we showed up in El Calafate, which is kind of the jumping off point for Patagonia. And we were soon picked up at the airport by a truck of people from the project, a pickup truck, and driven on a harrowing journey through some of the most rugged terrain we could possibly imagine into a moonscape that looked a little bit like this, the Patagonian steppe. So this is a high plateaus that are kind of in the rain shadow of the Andes. And after driving for 9 excruciating hours over roads that turned from something like this into basically just a big unending boulder field, we finally ended up at a small lagoon in the middle of one of these plateaus, where we were introduced to what would become our passion for the next 4 years, the hooded grebe. So the hooded grebe is just a phenomenal creature, and this project exists basically to try to save them. They're critically endangered, as I mentioned before, due to a number of threats. They were only discovered to science in 1974, which for such a large bird is extremely rare, but that just speaks to how remote and inaccessible the settings are in which they breed. So we get dropped off at a little camp like this on the edge of one of these lagoons and are just left there for weeks with whatever food we need to support us for that time. And essentially, as the caption here says, we serve as colony guardians. So the idea is that we live up on the plateau with the grebes, monitor them, learn about their behavior, but also act as a deterrent for one of their major threats, which is introduced American minks. So when the fur trade collapsed in Argentina, a lot of minks were reduced. They're an invasive species, and the grebes have no way to defend themselves against them. So the project exists to try to mitigate this threat. And as you can see here, this is a trap that the project uses. They put them in rivers to try to catch the minks as they swim upriver. And you'll often see in national parks and different places, even at bus stations sometimes in southern Argentina, they've started sort of a massive education campaign to get people involved in the project. So you'll see signs like this trying to learn more about where the minks are. Hooded grebe colony. This is what we would be monitoring, just sitting on the edge of the lagoons, watching the grebes do their thing. They nest in these vegetation mats. This is a zoomed in photo and a zoomed out over here, so you get an idea of the vastness of the place that these grebes nest. Also, so that they're not adapted to a aquatic mammalian predator like the mink. So they have these colonies and they're essentially sitting ducks, as it were. So the mink can just swim out and the grebes don't know what's coming, and they can decimate an entire colony in one night. And that could be 10% of the population, which is estimated to be about 800 individuals. So this is one of the amazing scenes that we've had the opportunity to witness while being part of this project, and they're truly fascinating birds and difficult to see on a rock jumper tour. Not impossible, and hopefully we can maybe develop a special itinerary to go see them, because they are well worth the time and effort and money. So so that just gives you an idea of how I came to know and love Patagonia. It's through the hooded grebe, but there's a lot more to talk about. And if people have more questions about the grebe or the project, we can address those at the end. So moving on, let's just go through a little bit of geography. So Patagonia, we're looking at kind of the southern cone of South America, and Patagonia it's more of a physical landscape, generally considered to be from the Rio Colorado south, although there's differing opinions. But as you can see by the scale here, it's quite a vast area, and there's a lot of diversity. But we're actually going to focus on just a small part of it. Part of that is because we have a tour that runs down here, and also this is because that's where my greatest knowledge exists. So. And even in this area, we have a very wide array of different types of habitats, from the sort of vast Patagonian desert or steppe out in this area. Then we get into we transition into kind of a shrubland. And then eventually, as we get up into this thin strip of Andes, we get into various types of forested, high alpine, bogland habitats, different stuff. And then Tierra del Fuego is kind of its own thing. So we're going to be focusing on this area during our talk. So one thing you may have heard about Patagonia is that it's windy. All I can say is that is an understatement, an extreme understatement. And I don't mean to say that to deter you. I think I've been back to Patagonia so many times, and I would go there every single year if I had the opportunity. But it is windy, and people should prepare for that. And part of the reason is because it's there's this Antarctic circumpolar current that just whips around the globe nonstop. It hits the Andes, blasts up over them, and then storms down across these massive ice fields in the Andes, and then it hits the Patagonian steppe. So it's windy and it's cold, and you never really get used to it, but you get to appreciate it and how it has formed and shaped the landscape. And of course, el viento is the Spanish word for wind. So if you listen to any of the the local folk musicians, they talk a lot of viento. So el viento leaving its mark on the land. Whatever trees do exist beyond the forests that are immediately in the Andes rain shadow, they end up kind of looking like this. And that's just what the wind does. So for most of the landscape, though, once you get beyond the sort of eastern flank of the Andes, you have something more like this. So this is just a photo of the Patagonian steppe looking west towards the Andes, and this is the landscape that the wind creates. There's virtually no opportunity for anything to grow above your knees, and most of the plants, we've got a lot of bunch grasses, small shrubs, little 4B wildflowers that are, you know, ankle height, maybe 10-20 centimeters at the most. But to me, this is something I really love about Patagonia, is the sort of these vast contrasts between these massive, beautiful granite peaks towering up into the heavens in the Andes, and then you transition into this seemingly barren steppe that is actually teeming with life. And you know, you get down on your hands and knees and you discover that there's this whole miniature world that has learned to survive and thrive in this windy environment, like these tiny little bonsai shrubs that, you know, come up maybe 10 centimeters off the ground, but there's such a high level of diversity of things like this that you can be endlessly fascinated just looking around at what you're walking through, even if it's tiny. Wildflowers as well can be absolutely magnificent, spectacular during the right season on the Patagonian steppe. This is just a tiny example of the wildflower diversity. A lot of them kind of a succulent variety to be able to adapt and survive in a very limited water xeric environment. I don't know what all these species are. I wish I could tell you. There's not a whole lot of literature on this, but they're beautiful. So finally, we're gonna start talking about some birds. This is just kind of an overview map that gives you a little bit better idea of kind of the different types of environments and aridity, and it also gives you an idea of where places that we might visit on a tour. So this is, you know, a couple hundred miles, but in Patagonia, a couple hundred miles takes a very long time to get across. So so here we have basically the steppe, the desert. That's going to be mixed with different shrubland kind of habitats, and that's how we're gonna arrange this talk. Is we're going to kind of break it down by habitats, and then maybe link in some of the tour sites along the way. So El Calafate, as I said, is where we fly into. Then we've got some more upland forested habitats just here on the flanks of the glacier, like at Los Glaciares National Park, down here at Tierra del Fuego National Park, where they get a lot more rain down here, so it's much more forested. And then we have various coastal habitats, Beagle Channel, Porvenir, some penguin colonies, things of that nature, and then your kind of high alpine zone in Torres del Paine. Excuse me. So moving on. So our first stop and the first sort of habitat we're going to visit is the wetland marsh habitat. And you wouldn't think of Patagonia as being a haven for water birds, but there's actually, because it's so dry, but there are quite a few of these sort of upland steppe lakes, and also some very large lakes in the lowlands, like near El Calafate here. And oftentimes those lakes will be fringed by some really spectacular wetland habitat, like this little preserve here, Laguna Nemez, which is on the outskirts of El Calafate. And as you can see, the Andes provide a amazing backdrop there to this, which is a really nice little town, fun to hang out in. And if you would get to spend some time there on tour. So this little nature preserve here, Laguna Nemez, is very well appointed for birders. They've done some really nice work with trails and bird blinds, which you can see are quite expertly painted by a abstract bird artist, whom I don't know, but they're pretty fun. Another kind of, this gives you a broader idea of the scene. Chilean flamingo is a bird you would expect to see there, and oftentimes in large numbers. There's a close-up of the Chilean flamingo, lovely bird. Coscaroba swan, one of my favorite Patagonian birds. I just love the striking colors. They do kind of look like creepy clowns though, up close. So they can be a little unsettling, but it's a really cool bird that we get a chance to see there. Black-necked swan, another massive, gorgeous bird with a red caruncle, striking bird. Red shoveler, one of my favorite ducks, probably my favorite shoveler, really gorgeous bird with all kinds of different patterns. You could spend hours studying it. Yellow-billed pintail, a little more subdued in the duck family, but if you get lucky enough to stumble across one that's bolting its flight feathers and can't fly away, then it might impersonate a rock, and then you get to walk right up to it and see all of its beautiful intricate patterns. So this guy, probably could have picked him up and eaten him for dinner, but decided to just take a few photos and leave him alone. But actually a really gorgeous duck. Chiloé widgeon, a really common resident of any water bodies in Patagonia, with their kind of green mohawk, really cool, really vocal. An interesting ID challenge for everybody is the Andean versus lake duck. Two very similar ducks, can be told apart by some slight differences in bill shape, head shape, but easiest way is the females, as you can see, are quite different. So we hope to get a look at them displaying or with their females. Because it's a marsh, there's obviously some rail activity. There's always going to be some rails. So Plumbeous rail is going to be the easiest rail to see, very gregarious for a rail, often seen walking out in the open, and quite an attractive rail with the kind of rainbow bill. One of the big target species for Patagonia is austral rail. This is a bird that was thought to be probably extinct up until the late 90s, and it hadn't been seen for 40 years, and it had only been about 3 records since 1900. So then people discovered it and started digging deeper and ended up finding that they're fairly common in Patagonia. So this is a bird we can hope to see in some of the marshes, not necessarily this one, but in Torres del Paine. South American snipe, another gorgeous bird, garden variety snipe, and these guys are pretty common anywhere where there's water or grass that's taller than them. Even a ditch on the road, you can find one of these guys. Black-faced ibis, very common and vocal resident, but a gorgeous bird that they will nest in Calafate. You can see them all over the place. Really, really nice bird. This is another interesting one, a big target bird for the area. Monotypic family, Magellanic Plover. People have had a hard time figuring out where to put this one for a long time. It has a very interesting array of different behaviors that seem to fit with different birds. It kind of looks like a dove, actually feeds its chicks crop milk like a dove, and behaves kind of like a ruddy turnstone, flipping rocks and walking around in circles, and very active. But apparently they're closely related to sheathbills. So it's a very interesting bird, and they breed in sort of high Andean salt lagoons, like dryish lagoons. But we can see them in this area, and they have bubblegum pink legs, which is pretty cool, and bubblegum pink eyes. Cinereus harrier, common around the marsh, nesting in the tall grasses. The mascot of Laguna Nemez, as you can see here by his little perch, is the spectacled tyrant, really cool flycatcher with sort of yellow skin around its eye and a flash of brilliant white when it takes off, and its flight feathers. Really neat bird. And his no less attractive female friend, long-tailed meadowlark, one of my favorite Patagonian birds. This bird, has seen better days. He's obviously molting, but he's still absolutely spectacular. So this gives you an idea of when we would be there in November, you would see him in his full glory. So full glory is something to behold. Patagonian mockingbird, the only representative of the mimid family this far south. Wren-like rushbird is an interesting little bird. It's very well named. It lives in rushes. It looks like a wren, like a marsh wren that any of you North Americans might be familiar with, but it's actually a furnariid. So it's kind of unique in that it lives in marshes and is an interesting little fellow and usually common in most marshes. So another spectacular marsh resident that we hope to get good looks at is a many-colored rush tyrant, and there's not much I can say about him. He pretty much speaks for himself. Tiny flycatcher, rainbow colors, really cool. So moving up in elevation and change in habitat, we make our way up to one of the incredible sights of Patagonia, the Perito Moreno Glacier. Which is just down the road from El Calafate, and is just kind of a massive extension of the Patagonian ice fields, and really nice facility they have here with a huge visitor center, tons of trails that go through the woods and viewpoints of the glacier where it's quite easy to see massive hunks of the glacier calving off and exploding into the water. So it's a really interesting site, and there's also lots of cool birds there. So this gets us into a different habitat, which is the Nothophagus. I'm not 100% sure if I'm pronouncing that right. I never have been, but we'll just call it Southern Beech Forest. And this is there's a number of different species in the Nothophagus genus. A number of them are deciduous, and I think one is not coniferous, but keeps its leaves year round. The word's escaping me. So yeah, this is kind of a typical forested habitat. It's a really interesting forest. It feels very Tolkienian and very sort of dark and foreboding with hanging mosses, very ancient feeling, but it's a really, really neat habitat to explore. So some of the birds we might see within the forest and skirting the edges are, well, Rufous collared sparrow is going to be one of our most common birds seen on the whole trip, but they're quite a nice little bird. And this is actually a local, southern subspecies. The Rufous collared sparrow occurs all the way up to Mexico, but have a bunch of different subspecies. And this one has kind of a weaker face pattern and is unique to this area. So Chimango caracara, a very gregarious bird that we'll see a lot of, is as all caracaras is in the falcon family, but they kind of fill the role of the ecological niche role of crows in this area. They're very, like I said, very gregarious, oftentimes flocky and very loud and scavengers. So, and usually very confiding, as this individual obviously was. Getting into the songbird realm, we have Patagonian Sierra finch, and throughout the talk we're going to run into a number of finches, and so don't let the name fool you. These are actually members of the tanager family, but they do have kind of a finch-like appearance. So Patagonian Sierra finch is typically tied to woodland habitats, which helps identify it. Austral pygmy owl, for all of our owl lovers out there, which I imagine is probably everybody, and everywhere in South America has to have its own pygmy owl. So we get the Austral pygmy owl down in Patagonia, and they're typically pretty common and easy to see in the forests and forest edges, and they make a lot of noise. White-throated tree runner, another interesting furnariid that you might think is a nuthatch because it looks exactly like a nuthatch and behaves like a nuthatch, but it is not a nuthatch, but really, really neat little bird. Austral parakeet, the only parrot that exists this far south. You may be noticing a theme there. That's actually, there's quite a few of the birds we would see in this southern area of Patagonia are the only representative of their group down in this area, and Austral parakeet is one of those. Magellanic tapaculo, another one of those, the only tapaculo this far south. It's not easy to get such a good look at them in good light, but they are pretty common in the forest, and usually, like all tapaculos, making a lot of noise, so you can dig them up. Getting into some woodpeckers, one where we actually have a few different species. A lovely little striped woodpecker, Chilean flicker, pretty common in forests and forest edge habitats, and then the big flagship woodpecker of the region is the massive and spectacular Magellanic woodpecker. These guys are just great. Tierra del Fuego National Park, they're extremely easy to see hanging out in the campsite in the park, and they're really fun birds. The female is maybe even more spectacular than the male, with her kind of crazy Dr. Seussian hairdo there, and they can be quite gregarious and confiding. One of my favorite birds in Patagonia, if not the world, is the spunky thorn-tailed rayadito, another really common forest bird that you'll hear and see them everywhere, following you along the trail, really curious, and just a really excellent little bird. Austral thrush, the only thrush this far south. Fire-eyed dewcone, a type of flycatcher, actually a monjita, as you may notice by its genus. It's a common one on the forest edges. A really pretty bird with its blazing red eye. Rufous-tailed plant cutter is another interesting one. The southernmost member of the Cotingid family. These ones are also a forest edge bird with a coincidentally also blazing red eye. And then, one of the bird that everybody wants to see, and you'll definitely see in Patagonia, is the Andean Condor. Once you get up into a little bit higher, you can see Andean condors pretty much anywhere, but it tends to be a little bit higher in elevation. And oftentimes you can see them in great numbers, but just one of the more spectacular birds in the Americas is a gigantic, massive wingspan with that really that thick white cowl of feathers and their crazy head skin caruncle thing. They're just a sight to behold. This is an adult male, and then a subadult male here. You can see he's developing his head skin, but has some really interesting, beautiful molt going on there. So it's a bird you could definitely expect to see, in a major highlight of any trip to Patagonia. So moving on to kind of a transitional habitat here. This is as you're sort of going up, transitioning out of the forest through some of these, these river valleys. You get these fast flowing rivers and these associated gravel beds and some more shrubby habitat along with those. And here we sort of have a slightly different suite of birds than deep in the forest. So starting off, getting up into higher elevation, you get white-throated caracara. And kind of a funny quick story behind that. My first trip to Patagonia, white-throated caracara is a really big deal, super coveted bird. And the place to see it is the Ushuaia dump. So on our last day there, my girlfriend and I get a cab, take a trip out to the dump. The cab driver thinks we're totally insane, drops us off there. We get our kind of grainy looks at white-throated caracara through the scope a couple 100 meters away, ticket, take off. And then 3 days later, we're hiking up the trail in the mountains near El Chalten, which is a little bit north of there. And we get to the lake at the top, we're enjoying lunch, and all of a sudden this guy just lands right in front of us. Other people on the trail were chucking it bagels and feeding it, and we felt kind of dumb for visiting the dump, but it made for a good story. So great bird. Spectacled duck is another big target species and a gorgeous bird. These guys you can find them in a lot of different obviously water-related habitats, but you'll often find them in kind of backwaters of some of these fast-moving streams, as well as different lake-type habitats. Sometimes called the bronze-winged duck, although I think nowadays spectacled is what people are going with. Ground tyrants are interesting little terrestrial flycatchers with really long wings. kind of upright posture. As you can see, these guys are, a number of different species are common in some of these boulder fields associated with these fast moving rivers, dark-faced being one of them, white-browed being another common ground tyrant in the area. I should mention, as with this next group, the Cyclodes, that these birds are completely restricted to South America, as far as I know, barring some sort of weird record. But I'm pretty sure that these are all 100% exclusive to South America. So Cyclodes, I'll be able to see a couple different species of Cyclodes. Cyclodes are very much tied to water wherever they are. So, you know, coasts, lakesides, stream sides like this. Most common ones we'll see being probably buff-winged Cyclodes. Gray-flanked Cyclodes is another one, which is very similar to the next one. Dark-bellied Cyclodes. The flanked is a little smaller, has more white on its breast, oftentimes cocks its tail, smaller bill, dark-bellied, bigger bill, darker breast, more streaks. But you see them side by side, the size difference is noticeable. Okay, so still in the same habitat, but this is just a lead into one of the most spectacular species, for my money, in the world that inhabits this area and fast-moving streams like this, the incomparable Torrent duck. This is just, in so many ways, the Torrent duck is just such an incredible bird. The way that they navigate these ice cold, bone crushing, fast moving streams, you know, the seeing them swim through this, it's just an incredibly impressive sight. And, you know, if one of us were to get into one of these streams, we would be dead in a very short order. But watching a Torrent duck swim through it is just a phenomenal thing to behold. And aside from their sort of behavioral adaptations being spectacular, they obviously can just stand on a rock and wow you as well. So this particular one is a local subspecies. This, by local, I mean sort of southern Andes. So there's kind of a number of different populations, and this southern population is easily separable from northern populations based on its plumage. It's got a much more rufous belly, kind of different face pattern. So for my money, the prettiest of the Torrent ducks, and a possible future split. And the female, arguably more attractive than the male. It just depends on. So next, my internet connection is unstable. I hope this keeps working. I'm just going to keep rolling. Yeah, so still good? Okay, great. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for warning me, internet. I'll be on my toes. So next habitat we're gonna work through here is kind of, I mentioned it before, the sort of high plateau Patagonian steppe. So this is going to be a much more arid, more barren habitat. Bunch grasses, small shrubs, and little wildflowers and succulent plants, sort of broken up by these rocky outcrops. A lot of this is volcanic in nature. We've seen this slide before, the dirt track into nowhere. We'll be driving on proper roads on the tour, no need to worry. So this will get us into our next suite of birds. One of the most easy and iconic birds to see in Patagonia, in many ways because of its size, is the lesser rhea, oftentimes running alongside your car on the road. And incidentally, they are quite tasty if you happen to come across a roadkill one. We can talk about that later if people are interested. But cool bird, giant feather duster on legs. Related birds, but much more difficult to see, is the Patagonian tinamou. This is a bird we'll try really hard to get on a tour. No guarantees, but as you can see, they have mastered the art of camouflage. both with their plumage and their ability to imitate the shape of a rock quite perfectly. So this gives you a pretty good idea of how difficult they are to see. This gives you an even better idea of how difficult they are to see. I don't know if people want to try. I'll give you a few seconds to count how many Patagonian tinamous you think are in this photo. I'm still not 100% sure I know exactly how many, but I think there are 1, 2, 3, 4. I can't see the fourth arrow on my screen, but I'm just going to assume it's there. So yeah, they're really well camouflaged, but a really beautiful bird if you get the chance to see it. The other tinamou representative in southern Patagonia, the equally spectacular elegant crested tinamou, typically a little easier to find and see than Patagonian, oftentimes in more lowland habitats, seen crossing roads. If we get up into some lakes, like I mentioned with the hooded grebes earlier, Patagonian silvery grebe can be a quite common breeder and resident in these upland lagoons. This is also a local sort of subspecies to southern Argentina, and probably a fairly likely future split, much different than the northern populations, which go all the way up into Colombia, if I'm not mistaken. You can check me on that. Some sort of terrestrial shorebirds like tawny-throated dotterel can be common in the steppe. Another really pretty bird. If you look closely, you can see this bird has kind of a wonky leg. Not sure what happened to him, but he seemed to be getting along okay. The seed snipes, really beautiful birds. There's 4 species of seed snipe, all restricted to South America and all possible in southern Patagonia. I'll start off with the 2 more common ones. So seed snipes are interesting sort of terrestrial shorebirds, as it were, but apparently taxonomically they're most closely related to the plains wanderer of Australia, which is, I don't know much about, but is fairly apt because they do wander the plains. They're gorgeous birds, kind of cryptically patterned. The males of the 2 smaller species, which we'll look at first, have gray heads and breasts. This is a gray-breasted seed snipe, kind of a medium-sized representative of the group. Next one, the female, gray-breasted, which doesn't have a gray breast, but it's a beautifully brown pattern with a sort of scaly look to it. Lee seed snipe is the tiniest and probably most common representative. Again, male with a gray breast. The black line separates it from the gray-breasted seed snipe. And these guys are pretty small, a little bit bigger than sparrow size. And the 2 large kind of grouse-sized spectacular representatives of this group are the rufous-bellied seed snipe, seen here. A lot of times you can see them in small groups like this, and the enigmatic white-bellied seed snipe. This is a very difficult bird to find. Possibly these 2 are equally difficult to find, but this just makes it that much better when you do find them. Magellanic horned owl can be seen somewhat readily in this habitat, even in road cuts potentially, nesting on cliff sides, things like that. This is, I think most taxonomies split this off of great horned owl, and it's restricted to the southern cone of South America. Variable hawk, another spectacular raptor that's quite common in this area. This is a female with a really striking pattern in the orange back and sort of bluish gray wings. Juvenile here, sitting in a calafate bush, which you might recognize from the name El Calafate, and it actually comes from this type of spiny shrub. I think it's a berberis, or related to like the blueberries and things like that. And you can actually in El Calafate get ice cream made out of it at a lot of different places. Calafate is a great place for ice cream, by the way. Black-chested buzzard eagle, another iconic raptor of the area. These guys venture all the way up into southern Brazil, but they're very common down here and easily recognizable by their sort of bat-like silhouette with the huge broad wings, wedge-shaped tail, and the sort of white black contrast there. Afflamato falcon, common representative of the falcon family. You can often see it cruising over the plains. When we get into some other interesting furnariids, the miners, which are named for their propensity to nest in burrows in the ground. So short-billed miner here, you see has a relatively short bill. Really long primary projection is how you identify this bird versus common miner. It's close relative. It's a little more streaky, stronger eye pattern, really tiny primary projection. These guys are both common in these sort of open grasslandy areas. Rufous banded miner, a little bit more striking member of the group. These guys kind of vary in habitat preference. They can be out in the open steppe, but also they like sort of canyony areas with more shrub components. Cordier and Conistero is another member of that group, or similar, and they are often in these sort of rocky areas. We can see a number of different Conisteros in different places along the trip: sharp-billed, austral Conistero, and more shrubby habitats, but this is probably one of the more common ones. Back to our finches, which, if you'll remember, are all members of the tanager family. So greater yellowfinch is, really striking bird with that bright, I don't even know what yellow that is. It's not lemon, it's kind of an orangey yellow. Patagonian yellowfinch, a Patagonian endemic, a little bit more subdued than its friend, the greater yellowfinch. Yellow bridled finch, a really striking bird, these sort of open habitats. So now I'll ask you to try to remember back to the Patagonian Sierra finch. This is its very close relative, the gray-hooded Sierra finch, and they're very similar. The females especially can be very hard to ID. One of the easiest things is this amount of white on their undersides. The male of the Patagonian also has more orange back here, but probably the easiest way to identify them is by habitat. They're pretty well stratified into gray-hooded being in more of a open areas, rocky plains kind of habitat, and Patagonian being in the forest. Another member of the ground tyrant family that's common in these open steppes, the gorgeous cinnamon-bellied ground tyrant with his cinnamon belly and cinnamon cap. Black-billed shrike tyrant with their easily recognizable white outer tail feathers, a type of flycatcher that occurs in these rocky areas. So another little kind of a miniature habitat transition here. This is going into more of a shrubland kind of habitat, which oftentimes exists in direct contact with the steppe. So all you really need is just a little drainage like this with a little bit of extra water, and you start to get some of these small shrub communities, and they can host a whole variety of different birds that you would not expect to see just 50 meters up the hill in the grasslands. So it's kind of interesting, and these can be out in the middle of nowhere, not close to anything. So scale-throated earth creeper kind of bounces between the two habitats. You see these guys pecking in the ground, digging little holes in the sand, trying to find insects. Kind of looks like a thrasher, but also in the Furnariidae family. Morning Sierra finch, another common one in the shrubby habitats. Not a finch, a tanager. The female and the male, quite a lovely little bird with I'm not really sure why they call it morning, because there's nothing morning about its song. It's got kind of a buzzy, sort of slightly unattractive song, but who knows bird names? What are you gonna do? For my money, the cutest bird on the trip, tufted tit tyrant, unless you're into tiny cute owls. The tufted tit tyrant is probably the top of that list, and really loves these shrubby drainages and just shrubby forest edge habitats. Gray-bellied shrike tyrant, another member of the shrike tyrants, mostly black tail, no white compared to the black-billed shrike tyrant, excuse me. So last sort of habitat area we're going to explore is coastlines. So we'd see stuff like this down more in Tierra del Fuego, Beagle Channel, if you remember from the map, Punta Arenas, Porvenir. So this is where we'll get into penguin colonies, lots of geese, different water birds, and we'll take a look at some of those. This photo is actually taken from near Ushuaia across the Beagle Channel into deeper into Tierra del Fuego. So penguin colony, this is what it looks like. This one in particular is in the Beagle Channel, and there's a king penguin colony further up north that we visit on tour. So the iconic and spectacular king penguin, there's just not really much more I can say. They pretty much speak for themselves. You know, giant, tall penguin walking around, you know, almost practically shoulder height, it feels like, and they're just a sight to behold. So moving on to the most common penguin down in this area is Magellanic penguin. This particular breeding colony, I think, is a couple thousand individuals or pairs. I don't know the exact numbers, but just, you know, penguins. You can never get enough of penguins. And because of that, there's an adorable and goofy Magellanic penguin chick for everybody's enjoyment, I hope. Gentoo penguins, another representative down here. These guys breed on the same island with the Magellanics. As you can see from the fuzzy chick here, they're definitely breeding, and definitely in smaller numbers, but still, you know, quite a few of them there. And they're sort of an ornery king penguin there, harassing them, or who knows what. Chilean skua is a common bird around these penguin colonies because they can predate the penguin eggs and small chicks. And as you can see, this Magellanic penguin knows it and is eyeing him warily and keeping his distance, but definitely enemies. Southern giant petrel, really spectacular bird that is actually quite easy to see from shore, in contrast to most tube noses that are mostly pelagic. These guys, you can just see them from your hotel in Ushuaia cruising through up and down the Beagle Channel. Very large, as its name obviously indicates, massive petrel, albatross size. Really cool birds. Dolphin gull is an endemic gull to the region, to the southern end of the southern cone. These guys are pretty common along coastlines, and you know, for my money, one of the prettier gulls out there with that nice gray body color. Magellanic oyster catcher is obviously, as his name indicates, a bird that is typical in this area, and I'm not exactly sure how far north their range is, but they're common down here. Rufous-chested dotterel is another neat little shorebird. They would, when the tour would be down there in November, we would see them in their breeding plumage, which is much brighter, more rufous here. I chose this photo because I think it's interesting. It shows a cool plover type behavior where they walk along, put their foot out in front of them and jiggle it around to try to induce various little crustaceans to come up to the top that then they peck and eat, and they'll just walk across a mudflat doing this for hours. Some long distance migrants, which are these guys, tiny little peep sandpipers that breed in the tundra in Alaska and migrate all the way down to the southern tip of Argentina, thousands and thousands of miles every year, and it's just mind-blowing to think about. And these guys are the two most common, the white-rumped and bairds, very similar. Some ID challenges there, but the simplest way is white rump's a little grayer, streaks on the side, bairds is a little browner. Steamer ducks are kind of a unique unique ducks that are special to this area, and flying steamer duck can be seen up in high lagoons as well as on the coast because they can fly. The Fuegian or flightless steamer duck, as its name indicates, is only on the coasts. And these guys are some of the meanest, most ruthless birds I've ever encountered. They are extremely territorial and will kill anything that comes in their path. Crested duck, another nice duck in that area. Great grebes can be seen with their sitting atop their massive sort of stick and plant nests near Tierra del Fuego. And we've got a couple geese. Argentina is great for geese, especially this area. There's a lot of interesting geese. So the kelp goose is exclusively coastal. It's really striking. The female here on the left and the all white male on the right. Upland goose, another quite striking bird, and can be common along the coast as well as in more upland lagoon habitats. Ashy-headed goose. These guys, you know, again, like I think more common near the coast, but also in some sort of larger upland lakes. And another goose we'd be looking for is the very rare and endangered ruddy-headed goose, which looks similar to the female upland goose. So, well, that I don't know how we're doing on time here. I think I took too long, but we've got a few more slides left. We're almost to the finish line. So that does it for the bird part of the presentation. I just threw this in there for any of you herp enthusiasts out there. Somewhat surprisingly, as cold and windy as Argentina is, it's actually quite a good place for lizards. So there's a whole rainbow of lizard diversity there, and these can be really fun to find and search for. A few mammal slides to finish it off. Some of the most common ones that we might hope or expect to see on tour: the Patagonian red fox, the ubiquitous guanaco, which is a member of the camelid family. Humboldt's hognose skunk, like to roam around in the grasses. The large hairy armadillo, also common in the grasslands and steppe. And the most iconic of Patagonian mammals, the puma. Over the years, I've been lucky enough to get to see a lot of pumas, spending many months in Argentina. So I'd like to think that I have the hot hand and would be able to get lucky on a tour and see a puma. So here's another another idea of how camouflage works in the wild. This is from my first ever puma experience, where a family of 4 pumas advanced on our hooded grebe camp, and luckily they're pretty wary of humans, so we were able to scare them off. But this is 3 cubs that weren't sure what to do after their mom took off, and I don't know if you can see the 3rd one, but again, there's number 1, number 2, and number 3, just peeking out from behind the rock back there. So let's see here. I think we have a couple more quick slides. Oh, just really quickly, sorry, I could talk about Patagonia for days, but even if we didn't see a single bird, it's just such a spectacular place. And, you know, every day the clouds and everything is different. These spectacular vistas, it's just, it never ends, you know, how amazed you are by it. The sunsets are unbeatable. Sunrises and skies in the middle of the day, you know, you just can't lose. And last but not least, the longing one feels when stuck in the El Calafate airport, wishing they had another week in Patagonia, like this poor rufous-collared sparrow checking out his reflection in the window. And one last thing before Keith starts, my pitch here: if there's any venture capitalists out there who want to go in a line of Patagonia Band-Aids with me, this is my big idea. Or I think we could rival Marvel superheroes with this. So you can contact me in the questions about that. And that's it. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bobby. And before we go into Q&A, just a quick note to say our GoFundMe link is still up and has been shared in your chat box. We are offering these virtual tours free of charge, but if you'd like to donate to our guides, the link is available. Also, a big shout out to BirdLife International for their work done on fighting the illegal bird trade and their Global Bird Weekend that took place recently. The Rock Jumper team is proud to have been part of the weekend, boasting the highest species count of 1,852, the highest total of any team by over 800 species. We had over 90 team members all over the world, passionately involved, and achieved third place in the fundraising for BirdLife International. If you would like to donate to BirdLife International, the Just Giving page has also been posted in your chat box, or you could email us at our office and we'll send it through to you. Next week, join us as we travel to the wilds of Alaska. This promises to be another beautifully presented webinar that we will no doubt learn a lot about Alaska's birds and other wildlife, while also touching on other aspects such as the geography, general nature, history, conservation issues, and more, as we have come to enjoy during Stefan's past presentations. So over to you guys for Q&A. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Nikki. Thank you, Bobby. That was very special. Definitely a trip down memory lane for me. I see a lot of comments coming through here as well from folks who have obviously enjoyed their time in Patagonia too, just saying, wow, that was special. Very much a great trip down memory lane. Some spectacular photographs as well.
Thank you.
And what camera equipment are you using, Bobby?
Throughout the years, those photographs were taken on a number of different cameras. I've been slowly evolving. Some of those were just on really simple point and shoots. A lot of them were on a Sony RX10 Mark IV, which is kind of their high-end super zoom camera. It's a really nice camera if people just want something lightweight. I've recently stepped up to like a micro 4/3 camera, an Olympus with a Panasonic telephoto lens. But I think that Sony RX10 Mark IV is a really, really nice camera. So for people who don't want to carry around something super heavy, I would recommend that to anybody. It's an expensive one in that super zoom realm. It's about $1,600 US dollars, I think, but I think it's worth the money.
Fantastic. It's nice tip there. Very nice tip. A few folks have asked about field guide to Argentina. And I'm just gonna step in here quickly and say that, yeah, I mean, for years and years we've been waiting for a real high quality field guide to Argentina to come out. I mean, there's been usable ones in the past, but Nigel Redmond's just got in touch and mentioned, he has mentioned it to us before as well, but the brand new guide is imminent. The Birds of Argentina by Pearman and Areta, and that's going to be published in December in the UK and in February in the US. So if anyone is planning on getting down there next year or in the future, get your hands on that brand new field guide. It is superb.
And just so Nigel doesn't think I forgot about him, I did have a slide at the end. I totally forgot about it. So here's some here's right in the middle. I gave you top billing, Nigel, if you're listening. Birds of Argentina. That's the gorgeous cover. And then I put a couple other birds that you might want to get if you're taking a trip specifically to Patagonia. The Birds of Chile is I think still a great book. It might be a little bit taxonomically outdated, but it's a really nice book to have. And then this is a fairly new book, The Birds of Chile by Steve Howell and Fabrice Schmidt. It's a photo guided, but I think it's quite good. So those are some of the options and that are easily attainable or acquirable. I don't know if you have anything else to add there, Keith.
No, that's fantastic. Sure, you were one step ahead there, Bobby. Absolutely, that's great. And that is the cover of the new book in all its glory. Yeah, that's fantastic. Just a quick one. A few folks have asked about the hooded grebe, and have a few questions around that. So we'll get stuck into a few of those questions. Just before we do, folks are asking the date of our tour, when we actually time the tour for, Bobby.
So the next available tour is November of 2021. I'd have to look at my phone here to get the exact dates, but I can pull that up real quick, I think, unless you happen to know it off the top of your head, Keith.
No, absolutely. Yeah, as Bobby says, it is November. What we're doing as well is we've got a bunch of Argentina trips, which will tag on as extensions to our 2021 Antarctica charter. and that Southern Patagonia trip is one of those. So it'll be an extension that you can add on to the cruise if you happen to be down there, or you can take it as a standalone trip. There'll be a variety of other options as well throughout Argentina, the northwest, northern part of Patagonia as well, the northeastern Argentina too. And they can all be taken as individual trips. But what we're going to do as well, I'm going to be working with Bobby, myself and Clayton, going to work with Bobby on adding a hooded grebe extension. The birds have become a bit unpredictable in past years, but yeah, it seems to be a little more gettable at the moment. So we're going to put together a special extension as well to that, which can be taken to, so for people that are keen on looking for hooded grebe. But otherwise, let's get stuck into some hooded grebe stuff, Bobby.
Okay.
How is the anti-mink campaign going on the whole?
It's actually going really well. The combination of the trapping and the colony guardian scheme has been really effective. I mean, there's only so much we can do, obviously, in regards to climate change and varying conditions each year, because these lagoons that they nest in are ephemeral. So they fill up with meltwater, and then the grebes only have so long to do their breeding before some of the smaller, shallower lagoons just melt away. So there's not much we can do about that other than, stop driving cars or whatever we do to halt climate change. But as far as the mink trapping, it's been a very successful program, and they've started trapping in some rivers farther south, because the minks actually have a huge impact on the torrent ducks as well. So they've kind of expanded the project in recent years to include torrent ducks. So they've really got a lot of coverage of these traps, and they do a really great job of checking them often. And I don't think that there was kind of a mass killing, I want to say 2012 or 13 or something, of a whole colony of grebes, and that was really what spurred them on to institute these mink trapping programs. And since then, there's been nothing like that. But the minks are nasty. Like they can do a lot of damage, and people have even seen them taking down a flamingo, which just blows my mind. But but yeah, so. Long answer short, it's been very effective.
Fantastic. That's great to hear. Someone else was asking as well, what are they dangerous for other species as well, besides the grebes? And you did touch on the torrent duck there as well, which is rather interesting, obviously concerning, but
yeah.
concerning. And just to tie in with that whole piece there, Peter's asking as well, do the minks eat the adult grebes, the immatures, or only the eggs? What are they exactly after?
Mostly the adult birds. I think in at least in whatever past experience the project has with any of these killings, I mean, the mink, they'll kind of just go through and indiscriminately kill whatever birds they can find on the nests,
Sure.
because I mean, if for everybody who knows anything about grebes, or if you've spent time observing grebes, they don't fly away, they swim away. And the minks are very fast and agile swimmers as well. So, but I think mostly it's just that the grebes are not prepared for what the mink has to offer as a predator. So they just take them right off their nests, and they may eat the eggs too, but at that point it doesn't really matter. Another thing I didn't mention in the talk, because I didn't want to get bogged down with that, but kelp gulls is another major threat. And kelp gull is obviously a native gull to a lot of South America, but they have been expanding kind of deeper inland due to a number of factors, and establishing colonies up in these high plateaus where they never did before. And that's been a bad thing for the grebes, because the gulls won't take the adults, but they will just swoop down a colony, scare the grebes up nest, and just pluck eggs right off of them. So that's another big reason that the colony guardians are there, which is to deter the gulls and scare them off. And that's generally been pretty effective too. But obviously we can't cover all of the colonies, so it's a difficult project.
Absolutely. Romney's asking, do the hooded grebes move to the coasts in the winter time?
Yes, they do indeed. And that's actually something that it's took them a long time to figure out. I mean, partly because I think that they're, historically there hasn't been a whole lot of birder coverage in Patagonia. So for for a long time. There just weren't people looking. But they do, I mean, they can't really overwinter on the plateaus because all the lakes freeze over, and it's just too forbidding of an environment up there. But yeah, in these larger estuaries on the coasts is where they spend their winters, and the project actually has counts where they go down a couple times a winter and try to get an estimate of population. And another big and unfortunate threat to the grebes is the damming of the Santa Cruz River, which is a large scale project that's scheduled for some time in the near future, and that nobody really knows what effects it's going to have, but it could certainly reduce, productivity in these estuaries, and which could have, unknown effects on the grebes and their future and these wintering sites. So hopefully, we find that we are finding with some banding studies and things like that they initially, it was thought that they always return to the same plateau. There's 3 or 4 different plateaus where they breed, and it was thought that they were very tied to one plateau. But it's become clear with certain banding studies that there is some shifting, and they will move to different plateaus. So hopefully that sort of adaptation is something that will allow them to work through some of these challenges. But it remains to be seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Many challenges for so many species, eh? It's just
absolutely.
Unfortunate.
The world we live in.
Yeah, the world we live in, for sure. So yeah, just George is asking about Fuegian snipe. I know it's a particularly rare species and not often seen. I don't know how much you know about it, Bobby, if you've seen one at all.
I never have seen one, and I try to do a little bit of research on it before. I don't know a ton about it. I mean, my understanding is that it's pretty difficult to find anywhere on the mainland. There are records. I mean, there's records even up around Torres del Paine, so that they're out there. But I don't know that there's a reliable spot, to my knowledge, outside of these sort of remote Tierra del Fuego island areas and in the Straits of Magellan, which is also kind of some other rare and rare birds that you hope drop in on you, like blackish synclodes, striated caracara, also in those areas, and are just, I think, really difficult to see unless you either get lucky or take a special trip out there to see them. But that's all I know. I'm not an expert, but yeah, I would love to see it. Cool bird.
Yeah, that's what I've heard as well. It's very much, it sounds like these offshore islands and what have you that you need to get into, tough on the mainland. But yeah, clearly a difficult bird to try and find it, and not one that we see on our regular southern Patagonia trips. Then just moving into some of the temperature ranges and how physically demanding it is. Bobby, some of the folks just asking what's the sort of temperature range typically on the trip. I mean, obviously we're timing the trip for November, so you're moving into the longer daylight hours and warmer temperatures. But yeah, it's still fairly cold, and as you mentioned, it's got the wind factor to deal with as well. But what sort of temperature range are we talking about on the tour? I think Bobby's.
I mean, as Keith indicated with his air quote, but yeah. So in November. Oh, did I drop out? Oh.
Yeah, sorry, you did there for a little bit, Bobby. Maybe you just want to pick it up.
Am I back?
Sorry. Yeah, you're back.
Okay, you can. Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, it's November should be a really good time to be there. Definitely very long days. It can get pretty warm. I would say. Let me try to do Celsius here. I would say the average is probably in the 10 to 15 degree range Celsius, so 50 to 60-ish Fahrenheit. You can definitely have days that get up into the low 20s or low 70s Celsius Fahrenheit there, but it doesn't really get that much warmer than that. It's possible, but I would say that that's the temperature range to plan for. So it's definitely layers, windproofing stuff. Is very important. And having not actually led this particular trip before, I don't know I would assume that the difficulty level of most of the stops is pretty low. There's sometimes, depending on whether we're hiking on trail or not, we might go off trail or something into the steppe, and then you have to be aware of where you're walking, just so you don't, trip and break your ankle, kind of thing. But for the most part, I think that it's a lot of flat terrain, and it shouldn't be too difficult in that sense. But yeah, the weather is definitely an important thing to plan for.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as Bobby said, there's a few folks that have asked about how physically demanding the trip is, and it's actually very straightforward. I mean, there's beautiful scenery all around you, lots of snow and what have you. I mean, we do walk up a couple of the glaciers and do some walking to try and find white-bellied seed snipe, which is a difficult target, and you do have to get out and about and around for that. So yeah, I mean, if you're not feeling up to it, you can always stay behind or do some birding closer to the vehicle and what have you, whilst those who really want a mission for it can go. But otherwise, it's a very easy trip, not physically demanding, and you get into some great locations very easily by road, and you can get a lot of the species without too much difficulty. So yeah, pretty straightforward as far as that goes. So let's have a look over here. Highest altitude that we reach on the trip.
I might have to defer to you on that one. I mean, the plateaus, like where the grebes breed, are around the 1,500 meters, 45 to 5,000 foot mark, and then and that's probably going to be pretty similar to like the Los Glaciares park area with the Perito Moreno Glacier. And then up in Torres del Paine, I'm not 100% sure. I want to say probably 2,000, 2,500 meters, something in that range. It's not super high. It's not nosebleed high. Not even. I mean, even in Torres del Paine, I mean, the highest peaks are just shy of like 3,000 meters, so like 10,000 feet, and that's like right at the top. So I mean, we get up to like 2,000. It's not not ridiculously high as far as altitudes go on the trip. And then as far as precipitation goes, should be pretty minimal, I would say. I mean, Patagonia in general is literally a desert. So for most of the trip, at least the northern part, the El Calafate, Torres del Paine, you can get a little bit of rain up there when you get closer up to the mountains, but sort of out in the steppe areas, less rain. But then as you get down to Tierra del Fuego, that's a much different climate, more like your Pacific Northwest US sort of place, and so that's definitely a more potential for rain down there. I'm not 100% sure that time of year. I think that it's maybe slightly lower chances of rain than other parts of the year, like in the winter, but I would say, I mean, you'll probably have a sort of windbreaker rain jacket anyway to prepare for the wind, so you should be covered already clothing wise. But yeah, definitely plan for a little bit of rain in Tierra del Fuego. It's certainly a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And even possibility of snow as well sometimes, depending on what the conditions are like. Yeah, absolutely. Diadem sandpiper plover, a possibility on the trip. I'll jump in here, Bobby, and just say no. It's not possible. Not possible on our route. We don't get into any zones for that particular species. But yeah, if you really want to see diademed, consider Peru and consider Chile. We have really good success rates on both of those trips in those countries. Is there anything else that you wanted to add on diademed at all, Bobby?
No, just that I'm also leading a Chile tour right before this one, so that would be great. It would be a lifer for me too. So I promise you, I'll try my hardest to find it.
Absolutely, yeah. No, there's high altitude zones. I mean, targeting the Andes, just out of Santiago as well. Really, really good chances for diademed sandpiper plover out there.
Right.
Another one here. What are the chances of seeing Puma? Of actually seeing a Puma?
That one's difficult. So I'll defer to Keith here in a minute.
Yeah,
you can go ahead and tell him what you think, and then I'll go.
Great, yeah. No, I'm very happy to jump in with this one. So the Southern Patagonia trip that we do, we specifically spend time in Torres del Paine, and that is arguably the best place in the planet to try and see Puma. And there's obviously no guarantees with the species, but our success rate there is really, really good. And why it's so good as well is that whilst we're there in the park for the days that we're there, we actually get in touch with some of the local trackers, and they actually go out and get into zones by themselves. So they'll travel with us to some degree, and then they will also head out earlier or stay out later and actually go into zones where they know the movements of the pumas, and yeah, and essentially try and pin them down, you know, try and find one for us. And we're in constant contact with them as well. So if we hear about a sighting, we can then go in and try and find them as well. So it really does improve our chances and success rates with trying to see puma. And as I said, we've had very, very good luck in Torres del Paine in the past.
Cool. Yeah, that's exciting to hear. And I personally have also had really good luck with pumas. So I like to think that I have an eye for them, but yeah. So they are quite abundant down there. As much as they have been persecuted by ranchers and other things, there's definitely a lot of them, and they have a lot of food with as many guanacos as there are. So yeah, I'd like to think the chances are good.
They definitely are. They definitely are. Right, and then just, do you know the call of the ibis at all? Do you recall it, the black-faced ibis? Myra is busy. She's obviously from South Africa. She's saying we have the hardy-dar down here, which has got this really classic call, and it wakes most of us up in the morning. Most South Africans are like, oh gosh, hardy-dars. The black-faced ibis.
I do know the call, and it is I don't know the bird that you're talking about. It is very similar, a similar sort of thing though. With that, they're super common, and they have this really loud honking kind of call that they'll just be blaring from the trees all throughout the day, and flying around in circles. And I mean, even just right in El Calafate, you can be walking down the street, and then there'll be one sort of foraging on the little strip of grass between the sidewalk and the road. And so yeah, they're very vociferous and gregarious, and yeah, so they're pretty cool.
Absolutely. A couple more folks just asking about these extensions that we're running on the back and front of our Antarctica Charter in 2021 in November. We will send these out as soon as we have all the details finalized, and we expect that to be within the next 2 to 3 weeks, and we'll then send that out to everyone. So you'll have the opportunity then to sign on to or take a look at a variety of those extensions that we've got offering. There's a lot of exciting trips. I mean, you can do anything from 2 weeks to sort of 10 days if you want a longer type of trip to back onto your Antarctica cruise. And yeah, for those with a little less time or want to devote less time, we'll be doing a bunch of day trips into Terra del Fuego National Park, which is a beautiful day trip. So you get to see some of that Nothofagus forest that Bobby was talking about, and a bunch of the classic species down there like Magellanic woodpecker and what have you. So that's always a nice option if you don't have as much time on your hands. Otherwise, yeah, we're coming to the end there, Bobby. It's been fantastic. We've got a few people who are giving shout outs as well. Janice says, hi Bobby, from Colombia trip last October.
Oh, right on.
And Nicholas as well is saying, very nice presentation, Bobby. Brought memories of our several visits to Patagonia and of the time that they spent with you in Regua and Pico de Caledonia.
Right on. Yeah, Nicholas, I remember you. Cool.
Fantastic. Yeah, there's a ton of other great comments over here. People have had a wonderful time listening to you speak, hearing all about your expeditions and time in Patagonia and Argentina, and really enjoyed it. It was a wonderful presentation, Bobby. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you guys. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you guys and give people some, just show people my passion about this place. It's a place that I really love, and I am always excited to go back there. So thanks so much for giving me this opportunity, and thanks Keith and Nikki for saying nice things and helping me through it. And hope to see you guys there in the future.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. from all of us from the Rock Jumper team, thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day and see you next week. Cheers, everyone. Bye.
Take care.